What is a person? Does it matter? Should it matter? We all use the word person all the time. So you might think to yourself, well, I know what a person is, but do you know where the word comes from? The word person comes from the Latin word persona. Persona in Latin means mask. In ancient Rome, masks were commonly worn by actors during theatrical performances. They had small built in megaphones that amplified the actor's voice, giving rise to the plausible theory that persona comes from per sonare, meaning to sound through. Eventually, persona came to refer to the role the actor was playing on stage. Later, persona took on a legal dimension. Just as actors wore masks to show which character they played, Roman citizens could assume a legal persona, essentially a legal mask that represented their role in society or in a court of law. To have persona meant having legal standing in Roman society. It made someone subject to rights and responsibilities, like entering into contracts, suing, or being sued. Persona was artificial legal personhood, but not everyone had it. Women, children, and slaves did not have full persona, and therefore had fewer rights than the paterfamilias, the male head of the family, who held full legal personhood. And it wasn't limited to individuals. Associations of men, called collegia, were also considered legal persons. These groups could own property, make contracts, and bring or face lawsuits as distinct entities separate from their individual members. This concept carried into the medieval world. The Catholic Church began referring to institutions like monasteries as juridical persons. This meant they could own property without violating monks' vows of poverty. In secular society, other institutions like corporations were later treated the same way. But persona wasn't just a legal idea. A more philosophical understanding began to emerge. In the 1st century BC, the Roman poet and statesman Cicero wrote in On Duties, "We must realize also that we are invested by nature with two personae, as it were. One of these is universal, arising from the fact of our being all alike endowed with reason, and with that superiority which lifts us above the brute. From this, all morality and propriety are derived." According to Cicero, a persona is a role that we play in society. Two are given by nature. The first and most important is the universal persona, our shared capacity for reason. This, he said, is what makes morality possible. So instead of persona being just an artificial legal mask, Cicero introduced the idea of a universal persona that all humans possess by nature. And this is where persona starts to split in two directions. Persona as an artificial legal role, and persona as a natural ethical role. Later, persona developed into a theological concept. Tertullian, an early Christian thinker, borrowed the term while translating the Greek word hypostasis. He used persona to describe God as three distinct persons, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, in one being. He referred to them as a trinitas, or Trinity, meaning three in one. Thanks to his influence, persona began to mean not just a social role or even moral agency, but a distinct identity within a unified being. This shift continued with the philosopher Boethius in the 6th century. He famously defined a person as an individual substance of a rational nature. In other words, a being capable of reason. Since then, many thinkers have proposed different definitions of personhood, but most still fall under two broad categories: legal personhood, that's granted by society to institutions for purposes of law, and natural personhood, an identity rooted in a being's nature independent of society. So, why does any of this matter? Because personhood determines who gets rights, who counts, who is a who and not just a what. If personhood is just a legal fiction, then rights are arbitrary. Society could declare someone a non-person and strip them of protections. But if personhood is something real, something rooted in our nature as rational beings, then rights aren't optional, they're owed. And that brings us to natural rights. Why do persons have rights in the first place? Because of our capacity for reason allows us to know moral truths and to make legitimate claims on others and on society. That's what makes us moral agents. Only rational beings can know that murder is wrong, and that's why they can be held accountable for violating someone's basic right not to be murdered. When society creates laws that protect against murder, it's not inventing a right out of thin air. It's recognizing a natural right that already exists and giving it legal protection. But this only makes sense if we accept that a person is a rational being. If we reject that definition, if we say that moral facts don't exist, or that reason isn't essential to personhood, then natural rights lose their foundation. Without moral agency, the idea of natural rights ultimately doesn't make sense. But if we don't accept natural rights, we have no basis to object when society restricts the very freedoms we take for granted. If rights are just legal privileges, then they can be given or taken away at will. But if rights are grounded in our human nature, if they're objective, then we must recognize the personhood of all rational beings. And we must protect those rights because justice depends on it. So, next time you hear the word person, remember, a person is someone who matters. Therefore, my question to you is, who do you think matters and why? If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more.